The day my daughter called me useless was the same day I decided to remind her who built the foundation she stood on. I remember it clearly, a crisp autumn morning in Boston, the kind where the air feels like it's cleaning you from the inside. I was sitting in my study, surrounded by the remnants of a life spent building something from nothing. Photographs of construction sites, handshakes with business partners, my late wife Eleanor smiling beside me at the opening of our first major project. 45 years of sweat equity, calculated risks, and sacrifices few people would understand. I'm Richard Harmon. I turned 68 last month, though most days my back reminds me I'm closer to 80. I started Harmon Construction with nothing but a pickup truck, a second-hand toolbox, and student loans that kept me awake at night. For 3 decades, I built it into one of the most respected mid-sized commercial construction firms in Massachusetts. Not a corporate giant, but solid. Dependable. Known for quality and integrity, the kind of business where a handshake still meant something. Eleanor and I had 2 children, Michael, who chose a career in medicine and moved to Seattle, and Cassandra, Cassie, who always showed an interest in the family business. When she graduated with her MBA from Wharton, I couldn't have been prouder. She was brilliant, ambitious, and I saw in her the future of everything I'd built. While Michael found his calling saving lives across the country, Cassie returned home to Boston. "Dad," she'd said, "I want to learn the business from the ground up." For the next 15 years, that's exactly what happened. I taught her everything, from reading blueprints to managing subcontractors, from negotiating with suppliers to handling the delicate politics of city permits. I introduced her to every contact I'd cultivated over decades. When she turned 35, I made her Chief Operating Officer, and I started thinking about retirement. By then, Eleanor had been gone 3 years. Breast cancer took her quickly, too quickly, and I found myself increasingly drawn to the idea of fishing trips, woodworking projects, and maybe even those European river cruises Eleanor and I had always talked about but never found time for. The transition seemed perfect. Cassie was innovative where I was traditional. She brought in new technologies, streamlined processes, and landed clients I would never have approached. Revenue increased by 22% in just 2 years. The board was impressed. I was more than impressed, I was grateful. My legacy would continue, evolving with the times but maintaining the core values Eleanor and I had built into the company's DNA. Or so I thought. The first signs were subtle. Cassie began excluding me from key meetings. "Just boring operational stuff, Dad," she'd say. "No need for you to waste your time." Then came changes to company policies I'd established decades ago: the profit-sharing plan for long-term employees, the apprenticeship program for kids from disadvantaged neighborhoods, the generous family leave that had earned us recognition as one of Boston's best employers. All gradually dismantled or diluted. "We need to streamline for maximum efficiency," was her explanation. "These legacy programs are cutting into our competitive edge." Legacy programs. As if the human elements that made us who we were had become outdated baggage. I voiced concerns, gently at first. She dismissed them with MBA jargon and spreadsheets showing improved quarterly earnings. When I pushed harder, her responses grew colder, more clinical. "The market doesn't pay for sentimentality, Dad." It wasn't just the business. Cassie's personal life took a turn I barely recognized. She married Bradley Wilson, a hedge fund manager whose idea of ethics seemed flexible at best. They bought a minimalist glass and steel mansion in Beacon Hill that looked nothing like a home. Their conversations revolved around investments, acquisitions, and people they were outmaneuvering. Eleanor would have seen right through him. I tried, for Cassie's sake, to find common ground with Bradley, but every interaction left me feeling like I'd failed some test I didn't know I was taking. Still, I tried to adapt. Perhaps this was simply the evolution of business in America. Perhaps I was becoming the stereotype of the outdated founder who couldn't let go. I reduced my time at the office, focused on mentoring a few promising young project managers, and told myself that change was natural and necessary. Then came the Anderson Project. The old Anderson warehouse district had been part of Boston's industrial heart for generations. 20 acres of brick buildings with history in every corner, most standing vacant for decades. The city was accepting redevelopment proposals, and I had a vision, mixed-use development that would preserve the architectural character while creating affordable housing, workspaces for artisans and startups, and community areas. It would be my final project before full retirement, a capstone that honored Boston's past while serving its future. I worked on the proposal for months, bringing in urban planners, community organizers, and architectural preservation experts. We created something beautiful, sustainable, and economically viable. Something Eleanor would have loved. The day I presented it to Cassie, she barely looked at the renderings. "We're going in a different direction," she said, sliding a folder across her desk, which had once been mine. "Luxury condos and high-end retail. The profit margin is triple what your community concept would generate." "That's not what the Anderson district needs," I argued. "That's not what Boston needs. And it's certainly not what Harmon Construction stands for." She looked at me with something I'd never seen before, not just disagreement, but disdain. "What Harmon Construction stands for is making money, Dad. It's a business, not a charity. And frankly, your sentimental attachment to the way things were is becoming a liability." I felt something crack inside me. Not my heart, something deeper, more fundamental. The invisible bridge between generations. "This company was built on principles," I said quietly. "Your mother and I." "Mom's been gone for years," she cut me off. "And your approach belongs in the past with her. The board agrees with me, by the way. We're moving forward with the luxury development." I looked around her office, sleek, impersonal, with none of the photographs or mementos that had made this space human when it was mine. Even the picture of Eleanor that had always sat on the corner of my desk was gone. "You've changed, Cassie." She didn't look up from her computer. "I've evolved. There's a difference." I stood to leave, feeling every one of my 68 years. At the door, I turned back. "Your mother would be disappointed." That got her attention. She looked up sharply, eyes flashing. "My mother would understand adaptation. And if she were here, I'm sure she'd tell you what I've been trying to say delicately: it's time for you to fully retire, Dad. You're becoming useless to this company." Useless. The word hung in the air between us, impossible to take back. I didn't respond. I simply walked out, past the receptionist who'd known me for 20 years but now called me Mr. Harmon instead of Rich, past the new employees who didn't even look up as I passed, out into that crisp autumn air that no longer felt cleansing but abrasive. Useless. I drove home in silence, no radio, no phone calls. Just the word echoing. By the time I reached my driveway, the same modest colonial where we'd raised our children, where Eleanor and I had built our life, something had shifted inside me. Not anger, exactly. Something colder, more deliberate. I sat in my study that evening, looking at those photographs on the wall. Eleanor and I at the groundbreaking of our first major commercial project. Cassie at her college graduation, beaming with promise. The three of us, Eleanor, Cassie, and me, at the company's 25th anniversary party. "She called me useless, Ellie," I said to the empty room, to the wife who'd been my moral compass for 40 years. Our daughter. The same one we stayed up nights worrying about when she had pneumonia at 7. The same one I paid for to attend every summer program and college course she wanted. I poured myself 2 fingers of bourbon, the good stuff I saved for special occasions, and made a decision. If Cassie thought I was useless, perhaps it was time to show her exactly what I was still capable of. I was not angry. I was not bitter. I was simply resolved. The next morning, I made 2 phone calls. The first was to Gerald Abernathy, my attorney for the past 30 years and one of my closest friends since our days at Boston University. The second was to Diane Winters at First National Bank, who had handled Harmon Construction's financing since we were small enough to operate out of my garage. "I need to talk to both of you," I said. "Not at your offices. Somewhere private." We met for lunch at a small seafood place on the harbor, away from the financial district and anyone who might recognize us. I laid out what had happened and what I wanted to do. Gerald removed his glasses, polishing them slowly as he always did when thinking through complex problems. "You realize what you're proposing will permanently alter your relationship with Cassandra," he said carefully. "She's already altered it," I replied. "I'm just responding accordingly." Diane, ever the pragmatic banker, was already making notes. "The timing could actually work in your favor. The commercial real estate market is strong, and Harmon has an exceptional reputation." "But Richard, are you absolutely certain?" I looked out at the harbor, watching the boats move purposefully across the water. "I built that company to leave a legacy that meant something. If that legacy is being dismantled, I'd rather dismantle it myself and put the resources to better use." They both nodded. They'd known me long enough to recognize when my mind was made up. "It will take time," Gerald cautioned. "Several months at minimum to do this properly. And complete discretion is essential." "Time I have," I said. "And as for discretion, apparently, I'm not relevant enough to warrant much attention these days." That afternoon, Operation Restoration, as I came to think of it, began in earnest. While still technically chairman of the board, I had been effectively sidelined from daily operations. This turned out to be an advantage. No one questioned when I occasionally requested financial reports or asked casual questions about upcoming projects. I was just the founder emeritus, indulging in nostalgia. Meanwhile, Gerald began the complex process of restructuring my ownership. Few people remembered, perhaps even Cassie had forgotten, that while I had transferred operational control, I'd maintained 51% ownership of Harmon Construction. The remaining 49% was divided among key executives, including Cassie's 15% share. My first strategic move involved a thorough assessment of the company's assets, liabilities, and contractual obligations. I discovered that while revenue had indeed increased under Cassie's leadership, so had our debt-to-equity ratio. She had leveraged the company significantly to fuel rapid expansion, a strategy that worked well in a strong market but left us vulnerable to downturns. More troubling were the changes to our corporate culture. Exit interviews obtained discreetly from HR showed a sharp increase in departures among long-term employees. Project managers who had been with me for decades were leaving, citing a shift in company values. The apprenticeship program had been reduced to a token effort. The family leave policy had been curtailed to the bare legal minimum. Harmon Construction was becoming exactly the kind of company I had always competed against, efficient but soulless, profitable but purposeless. During this information gathering phase, I maintained a cordial but distant relationship with Cassie. I attended the obligatory family dinners, listened to her and Bradley discuss their portfolio diversification and plans for a second home in the Hamptons. I nodded appreciatively when appropriate. I never mentioned business unless she did first. I was the aging father being tolerated, exactly the role she had cast me in. But at night, in my study, I worked. I reached out to old contacts, subcontractors who had grown their businesses alongside mine, city officials I'd worked with for decades, clients who still called me directly despite Cassie's efforts to redirect their relationships. I wasn't gathering allies for a coup, I was taking the temperature of the industry I had helped shape. What I found confirmed my suspicions. Harmon's reputation was changing. We were becoming known for aggressive bidding practices, ruthless contract negotiations, and an increasing number of corner-cutting complaints. Nothing illegal, Cassie was too smart for that, but 1,000 small compromises that added up to a fundamental shift in identity. 3 months into my investigation, I made my first overt move. At a board meeting where Cassie was presenting plans for the Anderson project, now branded as the Anderson Estates, luxury living in historic Boston, I cleared my throat during the discussion period. I'd like to propose an alternative approach, I said mildly. The room fell silent. I hadn't spoken up in a board meeting for over a year. By all means, Richard, said Thomas Blackwell, the newest board member and one of Cassie's MBA colleagues. His tone suggested he was humoring an elderly relative. I distributed folders containing my original mixed-use development plan, updated with current market analyses and financial projections. This approach preserves the historical character that makes the Anderson district valuable while creating sustainable, community-oriented development. The profit margin is lower initially but projects to better long-term returns and significantly less market vulnerability. Cassie's expression was a mixture of surprise and annoyance. Dad, we've already. I'm speaking as chairman of the board, I interrupted calmly, not as your father. And I'm formally requesting this alternative be given full consideration before proceeding. Several of the older board members, those who remembered when Harmon Construction first became profitable enough to have a board, nodded thoughtfully. The younger members, Cassie's recruits, exchanged glances. We'll take it under advisement, Cassie said tightly. Now, moving on to the quarterly financial report. I said nothing more during the meeting. I didn't need to. I had placed the first stone in my carefully planned foundation. As we were leaving, Cassie pulled me aside. What was that about? She demanded. I smiled mildly. Just offering an alternative perspective. Isn't that what boards are for? We've been working on the Anderson plan for months. The city is practically ready to approve it. Then I'm sure my proposal won't cause any problems, I replied. Unless, of course, it's actually better. In which case, shouldn't we want what's best for the company? She studied my face, trying to decipher my intentions. Are you bored in retirement, Dad? Is that what this is about? Not at all, I said. Just doing my duty as chairman. After all, I wouldn't want to be completely useless. I saw the flicker of recognition in her eyes. She remembered her words. Good. I patted her arm gently. Don't worry, Cassie. I'm not trying to take back control. I just want what's best for Harmon Construction's future. It wasn't a lie. Not exactly. The next phase required absolute discretion. While Gerald explored potential buyers for Harmon Construction, I focused on securing the company's most valuable assets, its people and its reputation. I began meeting privately with key employees, the project managers, engineers, and site supervisors who were the true backbone of our operations. Not in the office, never anywhere obvious. Coffee shops in neighboring towns, weekend barbecues at my home, fishing trips on my small boat. Casual conversations that eventually turned to their frustrations and concerns. The company's changing, Rich, said Frank Martinez, who had started as a carpenter on my crew 30 years earlier and now managed our largest projects. These young hotshots with their algorithms and optimization metrics, they don't understand that construction is still about relationships and trust. What would you do differently? I asked. If you could. Frank looked surprised by the question. No one had asked for his opinion in years. I'd bring back the apprenticeship program, for starters. Best source of loyal talent we ever had. And I'd stop this nickel-and-diming of subcontractors. We're squeezing margins so tight that the good ones are starting to avoid working with us. I nodded, making mental notes. And if you had the chance to be part of something that valued those principles again? Hypothetically speaking. Frank's eyes narrowed slightly. Hypothetically? I'd be interested. Very interested. Similar conversations with other long-term employees yielded similar results. They were loyal to Harmon Construction as it had been, not as it was becoming. That distinction would prove crucial. Meanwhile, Gerald was making progress. He had identified 3 potential buyers: a national construction conglomerate looking to expand in New England, a private equity firm specializing in construction and real estate, and most intriguingly, a group of investors led by Martin Chen, a former client with whom I developed a friendship over the years. Martin requested a private meeting. We met at his club, in a private dining room with a view of the Boston skyline I'd helped reshape over the decades. "Your attorney was quite thorough in his presentation," Martin said after the pleasantries. "But I'm more interested in hearing directly from you, Richard. Why sell a company you've spent your life building?" I appreciated his directness. Martin had built his own fortune in technology before transitioning to real estate development. He understood what it meant to create something from nothing. "Because I no longer recognize what it's becoming," I said simply. "And rather than watch it transform into something that betrays its founding principles, I'd prefer to see the resources redirected." Martin nodded slowly. "And your daughter? The current COO? How does she factor into this decision?" "She has made it clear that my vision for the company is outdated." "She may be right. But that doesn't obligate me to finance a vision I don't believe in." "What are you planning to do with the proceeds?" he asked. "Retire to Florida? Buy a yacht?" I smiled. "I'm 68, Martin. I don't need a yacht. And Florida has too many people who look exactly like me." I leaned forward. "I have other plans for the money. Plans that would honor what Harmon Construction was supposed to stand for." This caught his interest. "Tell me more." And so I outlined my vision for the Harmon Foundation, a nonprofit dedicated to affordable housing initiatives, vocational training in construction trades, and community development projects. Everything the company was moving away from would become the foundation's focus. By the end of our lunch, Martin was not just interested in buying Harmon Construction, he was interested in partnering on the foundation's initiatives. "Send me the details," he said as we shook hands. "I think we can structure this to achieve everything you want." The pieces were falling into place. But the most challenging part still lay ahead, executing the sale without Cassie discovering my intentions until it was too late to intervene. The opportunity came in the form of the Anderson Project. The City Planning Commission had scheduled final presentations from developers competing for the project. Cassie was confident, perhaps overconfident, that Harmon's luxury development plan would win. She had spent weeks lobbying commission members and refining the presentation. What she didn't know was that I had also been meeting with commission members, old colleagues and civic leaders who remembered when Harmon Construction had helped rebuild parts of Boston after the economic downturn of the early 1990s. I hadn't directly undermined her proposal, I had simply reminded them of what responsible development could look like. The day before the commission meeting, I suggested that Cassie and Bradley take my tickets to the Boston Symphony Orchestra, a rare gesture that surprised her enough to accept. "Are you sure, Dad? I thought you loved Mahler." "At my age, sometimes a quiet evening at home sounds better than getting dressed up," I said. "Besides, I've heard this piece before. You and Bradley enjoy it." While they spent the evening at Symphony Hall, I hosted an emergency board meeting, entirely legal according to our bylaws, which required only 24 hours notice to all board members. The only agenda item: consideration of a purchase offer for Harmon Construction. I presented Martin Chen's offer, which had been carefully structured to be too good to refuse. It included provisions for retaining most employees, honoring existing contracts, and a generous stock option plan for key personnel. "This is highly irregular," protested Thomas Blackwell, Cassie's ally. "The COO should be present for a discussion of this magnitude." "The COO works for the board, not the other way around," I reminded him. "And as chairman, I have the authority to present acquisition offers for consideration." The debate was heated but relatively brief. The numbers were compelling. The older board members, those who remembered my years of stewardship, voted with me. By the end of the evening, we had approved moving forward with the sale, contingent on standard due diligence. I slept surprisingly well that night. The next morning, Cassie was in high spirits as she prepared for the planning commission meeting. "The symphony was wonderful, Dad. Thank you again for the tickets. I'm glad you enjoyed it," I said. "Are you ready for your presentation today?" "More than ready," she said confidently. "Our proposal is exactly what the city needs to attract high-end development to that area. The tax revenue alone will make it irresistible." I nodded. "I'm sure you'll do wonderfully. I've decided to attend, if you don't mind." "For old time's sake." She hesitated only briefly. "Of course. It's a public meeting." The Boston City Planning Commission met in the Grand Chamber of City Hall, all soaring concrete and imposing scale. Cassie's presentation was polished, professional, and persuasive, exactly what I would expect from her. The commission members listened attentively, asked pertinent questions, and thanked her for her time. Then, to everyone's surprise, including Cassie's, the commission chair announced a late addition to the agenda. "We have received an alternative proposal for the Anderson district," she said. "The commission has voted to consider it alongside the previously scheduled presentations." And then Martin Chen walked to the podium. He nodded respectfully to me before beginning his presentation. For the next 30 minutes, Martin presented the mixed-use development plan I had originally created, now enhanced with his resources and technical expertise. He spoke eloquently about honoring Boston's architectural heritage while creating inclusive, sustainable community spaces. He detailed how the development would include affordable housing units, spaces for local businesses, and a training center for construction trades. Throughout the presentation, I watched Cassie. Her expression shifted from confusion to suspicion to dawning realization. By the time Martin concluded, she was staring directly at me, her face pale with fury and betrayal. The commission voted unanimously to award the Anderson project to Martin Chen's development group. As people filed out of the chamber, Cassie approached me, Bradley trailing behind her. "What did you do?" she demanded, her voice low and dangerous. "I introduced Martin to a worthwhile project," I said calmly. "One that aligns with his values." "Those were our plans," she hissed. "My plans? You had no right." "Actually," I interrupted gently, "they were my plans originally. Before you decided they weren't profitable enough." Bradley put his hand on Cassie's arm. "Not here," he muttered, glancing around at the lingering commission members. "We'll discuss this at the office." Cassie's eyes never left my face. "Yes. The office. 1 hour." I nodded and watched them leave, Bradley practically steering her toward the exit. Then I turned to find Martin watching me. "Phase 1 complete," he said. "Are you ready for what comes next?" "I've been ready for months," I replied. I arrived at Harmon Construction before Cassie and Bradley, using my key card to enter through the executive entrance, a small privilege they hadn't yet revoked. I went directly to the boardroom and made a single phone call to Gerald. "It's time," I said. Cassie stormed into the boardroom 40 minutes later, Bradley and Thomas Blackwell flanking her like lieutenants. Her face was composed now, but her eyes still burned. "Explain yourself," she demanded without preamble. "I believe I'm the one who called this meeting," I replied, nodding to the table where Gerald was already seated, a folder of documents before him. "Please, sit down. We have important business to discuss. If this is about your interference with the Anderson project..." "It's about much more than that," I said. "It's about the future of Harmon Construction." The door opened again, and Martin Chen entered, followed by 2 of his associates and Diane from First National Bank. Cassie looked from face to face, confusion momentarily overriding her anger. "What is this?" "A closing," Gerald said matter-of-factly. "The final details of the sale of Harmon Construction to the Chen Development Group." The blood drained from Cassie's face. "That's impossible. You can't." "The board approved the sale last night," I said. "An emergency meeting." Perfectly legal. The paperwork has been prepared. We're just here to sign the final documents. Bradley recovered first. This is absurd. You can't sell the company without shareholder approval. Cassie owns 15%. And I own 51%, I finished for him. The bylaws are quite clear. With board approval and majority shareholder consent, the sale proceeds. You son of a bitch, Bradley whispered. I ignored him, focusing on my daughter. You called me useless, Cassie. You dismantled programs I'd built over decades. You rejected every principle your mother and I established. So yes, I sold the company you thought you'd inherited. I sold it to someone who will respect its legacy while allowing it to evolve appropriately. Cassie's shock was hardening into something else, calculation. The businesswoman reasserting control over the betrayed daughter. Fine, she said coldly. Then as a 15% shareholder, I'm entitled to 15% of the sale price. Assuming you got fair market value, which I doubt, that should be around $30 million. I suppose I can console myself with that. I smiled. It wasn't a pleasant smile. Actually, there's an interesting clause in the sale agreement. Martin, would you care to explain? Martin opened his copy of the agreement. Certainly. The purchase is structured in two components. The physical assets, contracts, and operational infrastructure of Harmon Construction are being purchased outright. The brand reputation, client relationships, and intellectual property are being acquired separately, contingent on key personnel continuing with the company post-acquisition. Cassie frowned. Meaning what, exactly? Meaning, I said, that your 15% entitles you to a share of the first component only. Unless you agree to remain with the company under the new ownership and under the condition that you fully support the return to its original values. That's preposterous, Bradley interjected. No court would uphold such a convoluted structure. Gerald removed his glasses, polishing them deliberately. I assure you, Mr. Wilson, every aspect of this agreement has been vetted by multiple legal teams. It's unorthodox but entirely enforceable. And given Ms. Harmon's recent decisions regarding company direction, I believe we could make a compelling case that she herself established the precedent for valuing profitability over tradition. Cassie stared at me, truly seeing me perhaps for the first time in years. Why? Why go to all this trouble? If you were this unhappy with my leadership, why not just talk to me? I tried, I said simply. Many times. You made it abundantly clear that my perspective was irrelevant. That I was, in fact, useless. She flinched at the word. So I decided to be useful in a different way. The proceeds from this sale will fund the Harmon Foundation, dedicated to affordable housing and vocational training in construction. Your mother would have approved, I think. And what about me? She asked, her voice smaller now. What am I supposed to do? That's entirely up to you, I replied. You can accept your share of the asset sale, approximately $12 million. Not 30, but still a significant sum. Or you can stay with the company under Martin's leadership, retain your full equity value, and help reshape Harmon Construction into something that honors its past while embracing a sustainable future. And if I fight this? Take it to court? I shrugged. You're welcome to try. But the legal fees would be substantial, the process lengthy, and the outcome far from certain. Meanwhile, the foundation will be doing good work, and the company will be moving forward without you. The room fell silent as Cassie absorbed the full impact of what had happened. Bradley was whispering urgently in her ear, but she seemed not to hear him. Finally, she looked up, her expression unreadable. You planned this for months. All while smiling at family dinners and pretending everything was fine. I learned from the best, I said quietly. Wasn't that how you dismantled everything I built? One board meeting, one policy change at a time? Another long silence. Then, unexpectedly, she laughed, a short, sharp sound with little humor in it. Well played, Dad. I underestimated you. Completely and utterly underestimated you. I didn't respond. There was nothing to say that actions hadn't already expressed more eloquently. She stood abruptly. I need time to consider my options. I assume nothing needs to be signed immediately? Martin shook his head. You have 48 hours to decide whether you'll stay with the company under the new structure. After that, we'll proceed with the asset-only valuation for your share. She nodded curtly and walked out, Bradley hurrying after her. Thomas Blackwell lingered, looking uncertain. The other board members, their equity stakes? Are protected either way, Gerald assured him. This provision applies only to C-suite executives who have been with the company less than 20 years. In other words, only to Cassie. Blackwell nodded, relieved, and followed Cassie out. When the door closed behind him, Martin turned to me. That went more or less as expected. Yes, I agreed, feeling suddenly tired. Not regretful, but tired. What do you think she'll do? Martin considered. Hard to say. Pride would push her to walk away. Pragmatism might convince her to stay. Either way, the company and the foundation will proceed as planned. I nodded, gathering my papers. Then our business here is done. The rest is up to her. 48 hours passed with no word from Cassie. On the morning of the third day, Martin called to inform me that she had rejected the offer to remain with the company. She would take the reduced payout and leave. Her husband seemed to be the deciding factor, Martin said. Apparently, he has connections with a development firm in New York. They're relocating next month. I felt a complicated mixture of emotions, satisfaction that my plan had succeeded, sorrow for the relationship that now lay in ruins, and, surprisingly, a measure of respect for Cassie's decision to make a clean break rather than stay in a diminished role. Thank you for letting me know, I said. I wish them well in New York. And I meant it, despite everything. She was still my daughter, even if we now occupied different worlds. The transition of Harmon Construction to the Chen Development Group proceeded smoothly. Most employees stayed on, many expressing relief at the renewed commitment to the company's original values. Frank Martinez and several other long-term managers who had considered leaving were particularly pleased with the changes Martin implemented, including the restoration of the apprenticeship program and a return to more equitable subcontractor relationships. 6 months later, ground was broken on the Anderson District revitalization, not as luxury condos but as the mixed-use community space I had originally envisioned. I attended the ceremony as a guest, watching from the sidelines as Martin handled the silver shovel with practiced ease. It was his project now, his vision merged with what had once been mine. That felt right somehow. The Harmon Foundation launched with an initial endowment of $60 million, my share of the company's sale. We funded our first affordable housing project in Dorchester, established scholarships for students entering construction trades, and partnered with community colleges to create specialized training programs. I threw myself into this new purpose with unexpected energy, finding satisfaction in philanthropy that had begun to elude me in business. My relationship with Cassie remained strained but not severed. She sent a formal card at Christmas. I called on her birthday. We exchanged polite emails about Michael's children. It was less than I hoped for but more than I had feared. A year after the sale, I received an unexpected visitor at the foundation's modest offices. Cassie stood in the doorway, more tentative than I had seen her since childhood. "Do you have a minute?" she asked. "For you?" "Always." She sat across from me, taking in the simple furniture, the framed photographs of foundation projects, the architectural renderings of future developments. "You've been busy," she observed. "It keeps me out of trouble," I replied. "How's New York?" "Loud. Fast. Bradley's thriving there." She hesitated. I'm not sure I am. I waited, giving her space to continue in her own time. The development firm he connected with is not what I expected. The projects are impressive, profitable. But there's no substance to them. No purpose beyond maximizing return on investment. I nodded, understanding perfectly what she was describing. I find myself thinking about the apprenticeship program lately, she continued. And the Southey renovation project, the one where we preserved that old church facade and built affordable units behind it. Remember how proud we were when it won that Community Impact Award? I remember, I said softly. Your mother was especially proud of that one. Cassie looked down at her hands. I've been doing a lot of thinking this past year. About choices. Values. What really matters? She met my eyes directly. I was wrong, Dad. About a lot of things. It wasn't quite an apology, but from Cassie, it was monumental. We all make mistakes, I said. The question is what we learn from them. She nodded slowly. I've learned that I don't want to build glass towers for absentee investors. I want to create something meaningful. A deep breath. Which brings me to why I'm here. The foundation, do you need any help? Of all the things I had imagined Cassie might say, this was perhaps the last. Are you serious? Completely. I've already talked to Bradley. He'll stay in New York. I'd move back to Boston. She smiled faintly. We're separating, actually. Turns out we want very different things. I considered carefully before responding. This wasn't a decision to make impulsively, for either of us. The foundation could certainly use someone with your financial acumen and project management experience, I said. But Cassie, it would be a significant change from what you've been doing. The salary is modest. The work is challenging in different ways. I know, she said. I've been researching similar organizations. I understand what I'd be getting into. She leaned forward. I need to do something that matters, Dad. Something that would make Mom proud. Something that would make me proud. I studied my daughter's face so like Eleanor's in moments of determination. Perhaps this was what second chances looked like. We're launching a new initiative focused on transitional housing for veterans, I said. It needs someone to oversee development and community integration. If you're interested, we could start there. See how it fits. Her smile, tentative but genuine, reminded me of the daughter I had known before ambition and Bradley had reshaped her priorities. I'd like that, she said. Very much. We didn't hug. We weren't there yet. But as we discussed the Veterans Housing Project, I felt something shift between us, not a full restoration of what had been lost, but the foundation for something new. Something, perhaps, stronger. 6 months later, Cassie had proven herself an invaluable addition to the foundation. Her financial expertise stretched our resources further than I had thought possible. Her network of contacts, once used to secure luxury developments, now helped us navigate zoning challenges and funding opportunities. Most surprisingly, she had a natural gift for working with community organizations, listening to their needs with a patience I hadn't known she possessed. On a crisp autumn day much like the one when this journey began, we stood together at the ribbon cutting for the Veterans Housing Project. Cassie had worked tirelessly to bring it in under budget and ahead of schedule, without compromising on quality or sustainability. As the mayor made his remarks, I glanced at my daughter, hair caught by the same wind that had once swept through Eleanor's, eyes bright with the satisfaction of meaningful work well done. Mom would be proud of you, I said quietly. Cassie slipped her hand into mine and squeezed gently. Of both of us, Dad. She'd be proud of both of us. And in that moment, I understood something essential about legacy. It isn't found in buildings or bank accounts or even in companies that bear your name. It lives in the values you pass on, the principles that endure beyond your control or even your lifetime. Cassie had called me useless, and in her anger, she had inadvertently set us both, freeing me to redefine my purpose, her to rediscover what truly mattered. The company I had built was gone, transformed into something new under Martin's leadership. But its spirit lived on, both in the foundation's work and, unexpectedly, in the daughter who had found her way back to the core values that had shaped my life. Not through my control, but through her own journey of discovery. As we cut the ribbon together, surrounded by community members, veterans, and foundation staff, I felt Eleanor's presence more strongly than I had in years. Not in sorrow or nostalgia, but in quiet approval. This moment, these choices, this reconciliation was the true legacy we had built together. And it was enough. More than enough. If you like this story, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share your impressions of this story in the comments. To listen to the next story, click on the box on the left.